word yoga in America has received a lot of press lately. It's become a popular word, and particularly due to the very large number of yoga studios that have sprouted up in the recent past. But I know that the audience here has been aware of that word for a longer time of its history in the US. So I've just noted down the kinds of understandings of yoga that have arisen in America over the last even maybe 100 years. And we have right now the understanding of the word yoga is really related to practices of posture and breathing with a general goal of health and fitness. Part of the reason for doing this exercise is to show that all the various understandings of yoga that people have in America today are backgrounded by a metaphysics and a goal, a spiritual goal. And in fact, the metaphysics serves the goal. It isn't as if that there is a metaphysics out of which a goal emerges, but you first decide what do you want from yoga. And related to that is a understanding of the cosmos and of the individual place in the cosmos, and a practice that comes from there. So the practice of yoga today, which is postures and breathing in the general populace for health and fitness, the metaphysics is not that clear. We'll delve into that as we go along. The spiritual goal in India is longevity and supernatural power. So the physical exercises that belong to the system called Hatha Yoga have been developed so that the body can experience its own sort of extremes, its own powers. And it belongs to a larger tradition called Tantra. And we'll go to that later. Another kind that's very popular over here and is part of the lineage of this center is Kriya Yoga, and that was founded by Swami Yogananda in America. The practices are a combination of meditation, posture, and breathing, called Kriya Yoga. And the goal, if you were to ask somebody here, what is the goal of their practice? In the general populace, it would be something like a spiritual life. And a spiritual life means a life that's compassionate, ethical, and contemplative, and progressive in a spiritual sense. But if we were to look at the philosophy that backgrounds it, it's a kind of transcendentalism. A transcendentalism that draws its roots from an Indian version of interpretations of the Upanishads called Advaita Vedanta. And the spiritual goal of that path is what is called samadhi. In other words, being able to enter into very deep states of trance and ultimately enter into a bliss which is completely freeing from all the stress of life and all the various kinds of bondages of ignorance, which is called avidya in the Indian system. There is TM, which is the background of Paul. He comes from that background.
A couple of others here too.
I'm sure. And Deepak, I think this is an area where quite a few people who were initiated by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi have also come. Its main teaching or practice is meditation, as clear from the name, transcendental meditation. The general understanding of TM is stress reduction. That's what most people take it for. But particularly those who were initiated by the Maharishi and who were in this movement from the earlier period know its very profound spiritual depths. And the fact that it draws its origin to the Shankaracharya teachers and to the basically the entire lineage starting from Adi Shankaracharya, which is again Advaita Vedanta, a transcendentalism which leads you to an eventual practice of samadhi. That one goes into deeper and deeper trance and ultimately gets merged in a consciousness which is absolute, an absolute consciousness. Then in the 1960s, there were a number of other teachers that came who were of a very different nature. And we've heard of bhakti yoga, which is also popular in the San Diego region because they have an important ISKCON center here, International Society of Krishna Consciousness. And that was started by Swami Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. And their goal is delight or bliss, ananda, the bliss of relating to God, a relationship with God. And their metaphysics is a theistic metaphysics, but it's actually what they call a dual non-dualism, Dvaita Dvaita, or their particular branch is called Achintya Bheda Bheda, which means unthinkable difference in unity. So this is a kind of a variety of transcendentalism, but it's also about developing intimacy with the Supreme Personality of God. They don't believe in completely merging with Satchidananda. They believe that the Supreme Consciousness is actually a person, Krishna. And they believe the closer you can come to Krishna, the greater is your realization. So that is that particular school. And then another teacher that made a lot of impact in the West was Swami Muktananda, who started Siddha Yoga. And Siddha Yoga also teaches meditation, breathing, posture, karma. They also include a lot of devotional practices, singing, etc., chanting. And their followers are also, in the mass, interested in a quote-unquote spiritual life, a life which is ethical, contemplative, compassionate, what in the Indian terminology would be called a sattvic life, a life in which the quality of sattva is predominant. But if you go to their philosophy or their metaphysics, it's a transcendentalism with some expression, because they come not really from the tradition of Vedanta and teachers like Shankara, etc., but from what is called Kashmir Shaivism and the Tantra of Kashmir Shaivism. I won't go into depth as far as these schools are concerned, but later we can talk more about it if there's interest. But that particular school also believes in union with the divine consciousness and with the experience of bliss and power. So this is the background of yoga as it is understood in America today. Most people understand it in terms of the third column, but most of these forms have a more profound kind of understanding behind them, a philosophy and a goal. And that's what I wanted to draw attention to. Now, what are the roots of these schools? What is the root of yoga? What is the origin of yoga? And what does the word yoga mean? If we are to think of that, we go back to the very beginnings, the origins of yoga in India, the earliest layer of civilization, about 2700 BC, in what is called the Indus Valley. And we see these seals. And unfortunately, though there is writing on the seals, we don't know what that writing means. It's not been deciphered. So these seals that I'm showing you show some things in common. They show an interesting figure with horns and what looks like a third element arising from the horns, sometimes shown as a sapling with leaves, and sometimes as a kind of flaring icon. And the person is sitting with his legs folded. Now, this posture looks very much like what is later called the meditation posture, Padmasana, the lotus posture, but actually it isn't the lotus posture. What it is it's a very painful posture. This man is sitting on his toes. He's sitting with his legs folded on his toes, with his heels pushing up on his buttocks or on his perineum, between his buttocks, and he has his two hands on his two knees, and we are not sure what he's doing. But if we were just to take these seals, the one surmise that we can make is from the third and what may be the most complex of these seals. If we look closely at that figure, he seems to be a three-headed figure. There is a central head and two profiles on two sides. He's associated with wild animals. You can see them: a tiger, an elephant, a rhino, and a buffalo, a wild buffalo. That buffalo is called the gaur buffalo in India. It's a very powerful forest animal. Even the tiger can't stand up to it, that particular buffalo. But thinkers have surmised that what this is trying to show us is that this figure has power over these animals. These animals are somehow animals of the wild. They represent the wild. And this civilization is an urban civilization that has come out of the forest and built for itself a habitat. But it is still related to the forest in the sense that there are elephants that come in, maybe tigers that come in, and there's also the memory of an earlier life in the forest, so that there is a symbolic use of the wild animals of the forest to show the power that has been developed through maybe yogic practices. So this is a kind of hint of the yoga of a very early period in India. And as we go on, we'll see some of these things repeating, which is why people feel that this was indeed the roots of yoga in India. The earliest textual origins of yoga are in what are called the Vedas. And the Vedas are dated, at least in the scholarly community, to about 1500 BCE. And in this, we find a number of hymns. The oldest Veda is called the Rig Veda. And the Rig Veda has a number of hymns to what seem to be cosmic gods. The sun god, the god of wind, the god of fire, the god of lightnings and thunder. And these gods, many people feel, are just primitive approaches to cosmic forces. But if we read those hymns, we find that there is a symbolic cosmology there. A cosmology, a way in which the cosmos is structured and what happens there, which is repeated. The symbolic cosmology can be put in a nutshell by thinking of it as the swallowing of the sun by the darkness and the emergence of the sun from the darkness. So this is a very simple early myth that the sun is getting swallowed up at the end of the day, and there are psychological forces involved in that, because this cosmology is also a psychology. It is, in a way, not just some natural happening, but a cosmic happening, which is also a happening of consciousness. So there are powers of consciousness that are swallowing this solar effulgence, this solar power, and keeping it in the dark. And then there are other gods like at night, the thunderer Indra, who casts his lightning and his thunderbolts and breaks the hills of darkness, and ultimately the solar light comes out, sometimes thought of as rivers of light, sometimes thought of as cows of light. The word cow in the Veda, go, is a double entendre. It means both cow and light. And to this day, go means both cow and light. So this is the re-emergence of the sun. The sun is released. So now this is this battle of the gods with the powers of darkness. is a very early way of equating the macrocosm and the microcosm, a cosmology with a psychology. And that kind of understanding is something which is new. It is the contribution of the Veda, and it stays with the Indian tradition from that time to through all the changes and mutations of what we call yoga till the present.